The entire mansion went silent when the billionaire's daughter suddenly knocked over a priceless marble table, screamed at 6 trained caregivers, and locked herself inside a glass sunroom. Nobody dared to approach her anymore. 3 private tutors had quit. 2 nurses had walked away in tears. Even the family's security team had learned to keep their distance. But that afternoon, while everyone stood helpless beneath the bright daylight, a quiet janitor pushed his cleaning cart toward the locked doors. Nobody knew that behind his faded uniform was a man who had survived situations far more dangerous than an angry child. Nobody knew that the janitor had once been trained to remain calm when everyone else panicked. And nobody knew that within the next 10 minutes, he would do the one thing nobody else had ever been able to do, reach the heart of the billionaire's daughter. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can give people a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share the story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Wisdom Story House. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. The mansion belonged to Garrick Vale, a technology billionaire whose name appeared on magazine covers and financial news reports around the world. His estate was enormous, surrounded by trimmed gardens, white stone pathways, tall glass windows, and private security gates. During the day, sunlight poured through the enormous windows, filling the halls with clear natural light. Yet despite all its beauty, the house felt strangely empty. The reason was 11-year-old Maris Vale, Garrick's only daughter. Maris had changed after losing her mother 2 years earlier. Before that tragedy, she had been bright, curious, and affectionate. Afterward, she became distant, angry, and unpredictable. She refused teachers, rejected caregivers, smashed expensive objects, and sometimes locked herself away for hours. Her father tried everything money could buy, but nothing seemed to help. On that particular afternoon, Maris had been assigned a new behavioral specialist. The woman lasted less than 20 minutes. Maris had thrown a stack of books across the room and accused everyone of pretending to care about her because her father paid them. When the specialist stepped outside crying, Garrick stood in the hallway with his shoulders tense and his face pale. His daughter was inside the sunroom, sitting on the floor beside a broken vase. Garrick wanted to enter, but he hesitated. He had learned that forcing Maris only made things worse. His security chief suggested calling another specialist, but Garrick simply stared at the closed glass doors. He was a powerful man who could purchase companies, influence markets, and command rooms full of executives, yet he could not figure out how to help his own child. At the far end of the hallway, a janitor named Soren Hale quietly watched the scene while holding a mop. He was 41 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, and unusually composed. His dark brown hair was cut short, his face carried a faint scar near his right eyebrow, and his gray work uniform looked several sizes too simple for the strength hidden beneath it. Soren had worked at the mansion for 8 months. He rarely spoke unless necessary. He cleaned floors, repaired small things, carried boxes, and disappeared before anyone could ask questions about his past. Most employees assumed he was simply a quiet former maintenance worker trying to rebuild his life. They had no idea that Soren had once served in an elite military unit and had spent years learning how to read danger, control fear, and stay calm under extreme pressure. He had left that life behind after a mission had changed him forever. Soren noticed something nobody else seemed to see. Maris was not screaming anymore. She was sitting completely still. Her fingers were wrapped tightly around a small blue object. Through the glass, Soren recognized it as a broken music box. He remembered seeing it in Maris's room several times. Her mother had apparently given it to her before she died. Without asking permission, Soren pushed his cart toward the sunroom. Garrick immediately stepped forward, but Soren gently raised one hand. He did not speak. He simply walked closer to the glass and stopped several feet away from the door. Maris looked up. Her eyes were red from crying. She expected another lecture, another adult telling her to behave, another person promising that everything would be fine without understanding why it hurt so much. Instead, Soren sat down on the floor outside the glass door. The entire hallway watched in confusion. He didn't knock. He didn't demand that Maris open the door. He didn't tell her she was being difficult. He simply sat there. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The sunlight shifted across the polished floor as Soren remained completely still. Finally, Maris slowly crawled closer to the glass. She held the broken music box against her chest and stared at him. Soren reached into his cleaning cart and pulled out a small screwdriver. He placed it on the floor between them. Then he pointed toward the music box. Maris stared at the tool. For the first time that day, she seemed curious. She carefully opened the door. Everyone in the hallway froze. Maris walked over and placed the broken music box in Soren's hand. He examined it without making a big deal of the moment. One of the tiny metal pieces inside had become loose. He carefully adjusted it and tested the mechanism. A soft, imperfect melody began playing. Maris's face changed instantly. It was the first expression of peace anyone had seen from her in months. Garrick watched from a distance, unable to understand what had just happened. Soren handed the music box back to Maris. She held it against her chest, then quietly sat beside him. That simple moment became the beginning of something nobody expected. Over the following days, Maris began seeking Soren out. She followed him while he cleaned the garden room. She watched him repair a loose cabinet handle. She sat nearby while he polished the hallway floor. Soren never treated her like a billionaire's daughter. He treated her like an 11-year-old child who had been carrying something too heavy for too long. One afternoon, Maris found Soren repairing a broken wooden bench beneath a large tree in the mansion's garden. The day was bright and clear, with gentle wind moving through the leaves. She sat beside him and watched silently. Eventually, she pointed to the scar above his eyebrow. Soren touched it briefly. Maris looked at him as if asking where it came from. He simply smiled and told her through gestures that sometimes people get scars while trying to protect something important. Maris looked down, then she quietly placed her hand over her heart. Soren understood. She was carrying a scar nobody could see. From that day forward, Maris began changing. She started eating with her father again. She returned to short lessons. She stopped destroying objects. She even began helping Soren with small gardening tasks. Garrick was overwhelmed by the transformation, but he also became suspicious. He eventually asked his security chief to investigate Soren's background. The report arrived 2 days later. Garrick stared at the file in disbelief. Soren Hale was not simply a janitor. He had served years earlier in a highly trained military unit. His record showed commendations, difficult assignments, and several incidents in which he had protected other people under dangerous circumstances. Then, after a mission in which several teammates had been lost, Soren had quietly left military service. Garrick confronted him in the garden. Soren did not deny it. He explained that after leaving the military, he wanted an ordinary life. He wanted to work with his hands. He wanted quiet mornings, simple responsibilities, and no one asking him to be a hero. Garrick asked why he had never mentioned his past. Soren looked toward Maris, who was sitting nearby drawing pictures under the tree. Because, Garrick realized, Soren wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply trying to help a child. But then something unexpected happened. One bright afternoon, Maris disappeared. The mansion erupted into panic. Security guards searched the rooms. Employees checked the gardens. Garrick ran through the estate calling her name. Cameras showed Maris leaving the main building, but then the footage stopped near an old service path leading toward a wooded section of the property. Soren immediately noticed something unusual. A small gardening gate was open. He studied the ground and saw faint footprints leading toward an abandoned greenhouse. Everyone wanted to rush forward, but Soren stopped them. He moved alone. Inside the greenhouse, Maris was sitting behind a stack of old wooden boxes. She wasn't injured. She was simply terrified. A loud mechanical noise from an old irrigation system had frightened her, and she had hidden there. Soren didn't rush toward her. He crouched several feet away. Maris was crying. Soren slowly placed his hand on the ground and waited. Eventually, Maris crawled toward him. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, and she held onto him as if she had been waiting her entire life to feel safe. When Garrick finally arrived, he stopped at the doorway. He saw his daughter in Soren's arms. For the first time, Garrick understood something painful. He had spent years giving Maris everything except the one thing she needed most. His time, his patience, his presence. That evening, Garrick sat beside his daughter in her bedroom. There were no expensive gifts, no doctors, no business calls, and no security personnel. Just a father and daughter sitting together in the afternoon light. Maris eventually leaned against him. Garrick closed his eyes. He had feared losing his daughter. But he finally realized he had almost lost her while trying to protect her with money. Soren returned to his quiet work the next morning. He pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway as usual. But Garrick stopped him. He offered Soren a much higher paying position as a private family security advisor. Soren politely refused. He wanted to remain the janitor. He said the job reminded him that every person, no matter how powerful, still needed someone willing to notice the things everyone else ignored. Garrick smiled and accepted his decision. Months passed. Maris continued improving. She began painting again. She returned to school. She laughed more often. Most importantly, she stopped believing that everyone who came near her would eventually leave. One afternoon, she gave Soren a small framed drawing. It showed 3 people standing beneath a large tree. A father, a daughter, and a quiet man holding a cleaning cart. At the bottom, Maris had written a simple sentence: "Some heroes don't wear uniforms." Soren stared at the drawing for a long time. Then he smiled. He had spent years believing his most important work was behind him. He had survived difficult missions, carried memories that never completely disappeared, and convinced himself that his life would always be about keeping his distance. But Maris taught him something too. Sometimes saving someone doesn't mean pulling them from danger. Sometimes it means sitting beside them until they are no longer afraid. And sometimes the person who looks invisible to the world is the person carrying the greatest strength. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Your support means more than you know. And before we end, I have one special request. Comment, "Kindness can change a life," if you believe that one patient person can make a difference in someone's darkest moment. Soren remained a janitor, Maris grew into a confident young woman, and Garrick slowly became the father his daughter had needed all along. Years later, people would remember the billionaire, the mansion, and the enormous fortune. But Maris remembered something else. She remembered a quiet man sitting outside a locked glass door in the middle of a bright afternoon, asking for nothing, demanding nothing, and simply waiting. Because sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't fighting a battle. Sometimes it's staying when everyone else has walked away. If you'd like, I can also create ***10 cinematic photorealistic daytime image prompts for the key scenes, keeping the characters visually consistent throughout.